The match between Sabalenka and Eala develops into a major scandal, and everything was captured on tape. What started off as a standard match turned into one of the most thrilling moments in women's tennis history. Tension abruptly escalated into open turmoil after a disputed call and a stare over the net. Whispers from the umpire's chair, an unexpected clash. As two worlds, power and burgeoning promise, collided beneath the limelight, crowds held their breath. Every feeling was amplified, and every moment was filled with tension. And everything changed after the game when the video emerged. The rivalry turned into a controversy that the sport will never forget, and reputations were called into question. Instead of being the match that everyone feared, it was meant to be the one that everyone looked forward to. Aryna Sabalenka exuded the presence of a champion who has experienced every kind of pressure, limelight, and expectation when she onto the court. Alex Eala, who was younger, quieter, and unknown to many outside of her area, stood across the net. She carried a fire that had caused her to ascend faster than anyone had anticipated. Two entirely distinct routes, two entirely distinct energies. However, something felt dangerously unstable as soon as they faced one another, as if the atmosphere was too heavy for a straightforward tennis match. You could sense the difference just from the warm-up. With her powerful strokes, Sabalenka sent balls that echoed like tiny explosions. Eala moved with almost surgical precision, as though she was examining every bounce, angle, and tremor of the court beneath her. Everyone knew that she respected Sabalenka, yet there was an implicit bond between them that had not existed a week before. Rumors concerning remarks Sabalenka allegedly made and subdued responses from Eala's team had circulated throughout the locker room. The young Filipino star wasn't prepared for the mental strain that a player like Sabalenka entails, according to journalists. Every headline created an additional layer of suspense, like an invisible brick sandwiched between them. Nevertheless, their smiles appeared almost genuine when they shook hands before the game at the net. Nearly. Fans anticipated grit, firepower, and possibly even drama, but nobody anticipated what was about to happen. The stadium was alive with a unique type of excitement. Not Sabalenka herself, not the pundits, nor the chair umpire. Because something was crumbling behind her tough exterior. And something was stirring behind Eala's serene gaze. It was evident from the start of the first game that this was not your average match. Each point was significant. Every gathering seemed to have a message. Heavy and determined, Sabalenka's ground strokes nearly dared Eala to collapse beneath them. Eala, however, did more than simply survive. She responded immediately, matching Sabalenka's pace with a level of control that seemed unattainable for her age. The first spark appeared on the court at that point. A near miss. A ball that lands only millimeters off the line. Eala received a point when the umpire called it in. Sabalenka froze. Her jaw tightened and her chest rose. She looked first at the mark, then at the umpire, and finally at Eala, who did not blink, react, or rejoice. Ready for the following point, she just strolled back to the baseline. Sabalenka was more enraged by Eala's calm and silence than by any rejoicing. After that, the tension rapidly increased. Sensing the change, fans leaned forward. Something genuine and unadulterated was taking place. It was more than just a match. Pride, pressure, and unsaid thoughts collided and eventually came to the surface. And by the time the first set was over, everyone in the arena had the same question on their minds. Was the line always present, simply ready to ignite, or had this match just crossed it? The turning point did not come with a bang. It came in a whisper. One trade, 1 point. Suddenly, the game was on the verge of something much more significant than tennis. Eala strained and retrieved a looping forehand that dipped perilously near the sideline after Sabalenka served wide. The audience let out a gasp. After a half-heartbeat of hesitation, the line umpire called it in. Point Eala. However, Sabalenka didn't actually hear the call. She heard a deeper sound, a shiver of anxiety that the match was disappearing more quickly than she had anticipated, and the sting of doubt. Her eyes grew wide. She let her racket fall to her side. She moved in the direction of the target, shaking her head as though she couldn't understand what reality had just thrown at her. "No way," she mumbled, her voice cutting through the din of the stadium. The umpire in the chair leaned forward. "The call is still in effect. Please go ahead." That should have been the end of it. A dispute, a gesture, a return to the starting point. However, Sabalenka wasn't Sabalenka at the time. Seeking thunder, she was a storm. Palms out, her face tense with incredulity, she walked over to the umpire's chair. "How's that going?" "You didn't even check it," she remarked, raising her voice in a controlled manner that just feeds the heat beneath the surface. The cameras enlarged. The audience became silent. Eala's heart pounded through her fingertips as she stood immobile at the baseline, holding onto her racket. She was in the center of it all, even though she wasn't involved. Sabalenka gestured to Eala. "Every time this occurs, she wins every close call." Like a spark hitting dry grass, the words landed on the court. The stands echoed with gasps. Eala's face remained unchanged. However, her jaw hardly clenched. Though not for the cameras, it was nevertheless a response. The umpire tried to defuse the situation. "Please come back to the game, Aryna." But Sabalenka was not going to back down. "This is absurd. Tell me right now if this is going to be the case." Then came the moment that, in a matter of hours, would repeatedly appear on social media. Before turning back to the baseline, Sabalenka said, "Let her win like this if she wants to," loud enough for the courtside microphones to pick up and loud enough for the cameras to focus. Eala jerked her head up. The audience responded right away. That was all. The actual start. Because everyone who was watching heard those 8 words, calm, sharp, and spoken like a sentence. And Eala's composure was broken by emotion for the first time during the match. Nor fear, nor rage. Something in the middle. A sharp object. Something she was no longer able to swallow. She was only a few steps away from Sabalenka as she made her way to the net. "Do you believe I need assistance to defeat you?" Her voice was calm but gentle as she requested. The stadium erupted, the game had officially altered, and nothing would be the same going forward. The controversy didn't wait for the outcome. It started in real time on the court, overflowing over the lines of professional sportsmanship and landing squarely in the middle of a scandal from which neither player could escape. When the tide turned in Ayala's favor, Sabalenka's annoyance turned into something more intense and erratic, which the cameras captured from all sides. It began with a miss, a standard backhand that Sabalenka typically pounded mindlessly. However, her timing was off this time. After clipping the net, the ball returned to her side. After a brief moment of freezing, she used a single swing to destroy her racket. Like a gunshot, the crack reverberated across the arena. The umpire winced. The audience gasped. Eala tried not to reveal how terrified she was as she looked down. With the aggressiveness of someone battling her own feelings, Sabalenka stomped to her bench and grabbed a new racket. However, before the game was even over, the cameras captured something else that would make headlines. "This is a joke," she muttered as she peered across the internet. "They are giving her all kinds of gifts." The microphone picked it up. It was heard by the commentators. The stadium responded with a mixture of amazement, rage, and disbelief in a matter of seconds. Eala didn't respond, at least not visibly. But as she took a sip of water, everyone saw that her hands were shaking. Not pressure, panic, or adrenaline. She was suddenly hit by a storm. The suspense permeated everything as play commenced. Every call turned into a battleground. Sabalinka once. When Eala received another clothesline call, Sabalenka laughed sarcastically. She turned to the umpire and exclaimed, "Oh wow, another miracle for her. Why not continue?" The audience jeered. Sabalenka gestured to them. "Yes, go ahead, dude. As if you have any knowledge." With her shoulders taut and her eyes down, Eala made her way to the baseline. However, she looked up and admonished Sabalenka to quit blaming everyone else in a moment that even startled her. The stadium blew apart. It was like fuel hitting an open flame in that one statement. With amazement and bewilderment mixed together, Sabalenka moved forward and fixed her gaze on Eala. She yelled, "You don't talk to me like that." But this time, Eala refused to back down. "I'm only here to have fun. Deal with your problems if you have them." The umpire called them both to refocus right away. However, the harm had already been done. The threshold had been crossed by the match. Points and sets were no longer relevant. This has to do with identification, pride, and ego. The emotional repercussions was finished by the last changeover. Gripping her racket as if it were an anchor, Sabalenka sat. Eala tried to ignore the sounds by sitting with her eyes closed and taking deep breaths. "The match has become personal," the pundits muttered. The audience felt history. Messy, dramatic, unforgettable history, taking place in front of them. Because everyone who was watching realized something at that precise time. They didn't anticipate this rivalry. They would never forget this scandal. The world finally stopped long enough to pose the question that lurked beneath every rally, every look, and every whispered remark, even if the match was raging with emotion. This was the true turning point. What was true in this case? Because scandals don't just happen. They arise from the collision of people's beliefs, perceptions, and perceptions of what they have seen. Both Sabalenka and Eala were carrying more than the burden of a tennis match as they went into the next match. They carried stories that were discussed endlessly on the internet, whispered in locker rooms, and yelled from the stands. And now, in real time, the reality of their true selves was emerging beneath the limelight. Eala, who had always been the reserved, respectful person who bowed her head after both victories and defeats, was abruptly thrust into a role she had never requested, that of the fighter, against Sabalenka's words rather than Sabalenka's authority, and against claims that her success was due to favoritism, luck, or umpire gifts. Eala had struggled for everything for years in silence and by herself, so it wasn't only false. It went deeper than anyone could have imagined. On the other hand, Sabalenka, who was often bold and unwavering, was collapsing due to insecurity, something she never wanted to acknowledge. Not a dread of losing the game, but a fear of losing control and seeing someone younger, more composed, and surprisingly unaffected by the mayhem Sabalenka had caused take center stage. Fear of being taken over. At this point, the truth started to come to light. Eala took a minute to compose herself and breathe before stepping forward to serve, not to stall or provoke. Then she did what no one had anticipated. Throughout her career, she played the cleanest, sharpest game. 4 wins, 4 points, and a grasp on love. No shout, no celebration. Just concentrate. Sabalenka did not dispute, complain, or react for the first time during the entire match. She pressed her racket's handle against her forehead while staring at the ground, as though she required the slight pressure to prevent a complete crack. First moment of truth. Luck wasn't the reason Eala was winning. Because she earned it, she was succeeding. Second moment of truth. Eala did not infuriate Sabalenka. She was upset with herself. The stadium was aware of it. It was caught by the cameras. More than words could express it, silence did. Sabalenka eventually let out a lengthy, trembling breath when she got back to the baseline, displaying more sensitivity than she had throughout the season. Eala also witnessed it. For the first time, she saw Sabalenka as a person crumbling beneath her own expectations rather than as a power or a threat. Then an unforeseen event occurred. In between, Sabalenka muttered, "I didn't intend for it to go this far," just loud enough for Eala to hear. Eala remained silent. She was not required to. Between them, the truth was becoming apparent. Painful, raw, and indisputable. Because the rivalry subsided at that precise moment. The controversy came to a halt. And both players' humanity eventually came to light. Favoritism was not the issue here. It has nothing to do with luck. This had nothing to do with hostility. This has to do with applying pressure, shattering one player, and creating another. The battle between Sabalenka and Eala came to an end when the final point was played, the last ball hit the line, and the crowd roared in a mixture of incredulity and weary relief. However, the fallout, the significance, and the legacy of what transpired lingered in the air like smoke after a wildfire. The scoreline lost its significance. The victor? Nearly incidental. Because it was more than just a match that the world saw. It was a turning point that divided careers into before and after. Despite the mayhem, Eala approached the net with the same calm demeanor that she had maintained from the first point. Her breath was steady, her demeanor bland, and her hand was outstretched. However, it was evident to all that she was a different player from the one who had entered the court 2 hours prior. Something significant had altered. She had persevered through the storm. Without flinching, she had faced down the loudest and largest force on the court. With slow, heavy feet and low shoulders, Sabalenka seemed to be carrying the weight of the entire afternoon into her bones. The shake of their hands was fleeting, almost brittle. They didn't say anything. It wasn't necessary. Weary, shaken, and human, their eyes spoke for them. Naturally, the cameras quickly zoomed in. Tension, pride, and the quiet electricity between them were all discussed in whispers by commentators. However, the reality was both simpler and much more intricate. A hero and a villain were not produced by this duel. There were no emotional winners or losers as a result. It revealed the brittle, erratic humanity that lies behind great athletics. To tremendous cheers, Eala left the court. She became more than just a rising star for her supporters, her nation, and everyone who had witnessed her withstand every emotional blow. She turned to become a symbol. A reminder that power doesn't always appear like fire, that humility isn't capitulation, and that serenity isn't weakness. Silence might appear to be maintained with dignity at times. Conversely, Sabalenka departed down a question-filled tunnel. Voices and cameras were pursuing her. Was she acting inappropriately? Was she feeling overburdened? Was she misinterpreted? She didn't respond because she didn't fully understand the response, not because she was dismissive. And perhaps that's what the world finally witnessed, a champion faltering under duress, a human moment from someone who was typically larger than life. The narratives had already taken shape by the time of the press conferences. It was referred to as a controversy in headlines. Fans argued over who was right, who was wrong, and who went too far. Videos of the stare-downs, the words, the meltdown, and the serenity went viral. However, beneath all the commotion, a more profound event took place. Tennis developed a rivalry that it didn't realize it needed. It wasn't based on animosity or disdain, but rather on the uncomfortable, indisputable fact that pressure reveals individuals, and sometimes the public isn't prepared for what it sees. In the weeks that followed, children imitated Eala's poise, pundits examined Sabalenka's feelings, and the match remained one of the most memorable personality clashes the sport had witnessed in a long time. One question persisted as fans repeatedly watched the video. Was this the height of a competition or the beginning of something greater? Ultimately, there were no winners or losers in this scandal. It was about the collision of two strong forces. Fire and stillness, pressure and promise, ego and assent. If anything, this match demonstrated that tennis is more than simply a sport. The world is unable to look away from this emotional battleground. The next story is already developing, so be sure to subscribe if you want more compelling tennis rivalries, untold tales, and behind-the-scenes drama.